and scores!
Great move by Davies. Well, this would be something. Ausgezeichnet!
Brian White chips, it'll make it!
For the first time in a very, very long time, welcome back to Capscast, everyone. We will start off with a little bit of housekeeping here as we are returning and finally back from our extended time away from the podcast. Damien, my co-host, he is not going to be with me today. He is 8 weeks from welcoming his firstborn into the world. So going forward, Damien's going to be jumping in and out of things when he can. And obviously next week is a massive game against LA, so he will be joining me next week. We've already set up a schedule that fits with his newly crowned dad life. So stop in just like a moment of appreciation for him. And also, he is working very heavy behind the scenes with me, actually structured this podcast out for us today. So very, very still involved in the podcast. Just his beautiful face will be missing today, as well as his controversial hot takes, you could say. But yeah, so let's get a jump on things here, guys. We've been away for quite a while. A lot of stuff has happened in the team. Don't want to really spend the whole time recapping because I think we need like 3.5 hours just to recap all the little things that have gone on in this club, as well as like all the hot takes that I truly do have. I think all of those have developed during our playoff run and the Inter Miami bias, but whatever. No reason to focus on spilt milk here. So let's kind of just kick it off with this week here. Sebastian Berhalter, I think this is the biggest news coming out of the Whitecaps camp. That transfer to Middlesbrough pretty much looks signed, sealed, and delivered. We're just kind of waiting on a club announcement. Anybody with like eagle eyes has kind of spotted he's been out of the team. But that being said, a little bit less to look at with that because I believe FIFA has a mandatory 21-day break. Maybe it's optional because we see like Cubas and Alumi are back in the squad. But anybody that was participating in the World Cup, they were, I guess, let's say entitled to 21 days off, especially because the U.S. crashed out the round of 16. So potentially he is obviously entitled to a bit more time off, but that transfer looks to be done. Anybody watching the game knows that he's been out of the squad. MLS TV, Apple TV, whatever the broadcasting crew is called, kind of let it slip that there's some squad news. It looks like they kind of slip of the tongue there. They let that kind of slip out. But yeah, so let's wait for that to go with. I think that is an incredible loss to have. I feel like he's been the heart and soul of this team. That link up with Muller has just been phenomenal. We saw that all across the MLS playoff run last year and into this year. I feel like when we needed something, he was there to provide that spark, whether that was, a swinging in corner, even just like running into that south side, raising his hands, beating his chest. It was just something to get us going. So that's going to be a huge spot to fill. That being said, in football, whenever there's a huge void, it allows players to step up. So let's kind of keep a pulse on that to see who really steps up in that middle role. I feel like it provides opportunity to Cubas and Larraz to kind of really be those central defenders. And then how Sorensen wants to create the midfield. I actually think Jeevan Badwell is going to look class now with Berhalter out of the team. I don't want to stress that this is a minor loss. This is a huge loss to the team. But let's wait for the here we go on that. And let's kind of get into this. So first in the West, LA have 2 games on hand. We play LA this Saturday in BC Place. I think it's good to preface the conversation with that to start, just because this is kind of one of these games where we go into Minnesota, it's an away, and you're kind of sat there thinking that points on the road are so crucial right now. Whitecaps haven't played in BC Place since April due to the World Cup renovations, and then obviously with the World Cup taking place, there's just been nothing really happening with the team. I feel like, me and Damien were talking about this yesterday, that the team just looks 1 foot off the pace. I think being away and out of MLS action for so long, and then just jumping back into this really cold-footed, it is what it is. Okay, so we go into Minnesota last night. On the surface, it's a scoreless draw, so that really doesn't jump off the page, but I think it's one of these games that tells a story of where this team is right now. The questions really coming out of this game is this a missed opportunity, or was this something that on the road is a mature performance? This kind of showed the qualities that a good team needs to go on the road. I know you're dropping points, but still picking up points, because the reality is this is a very, very long season. Going on the road, keeping a clean sheet, and coming away with a point is never a bad result. Same time, we want to be an ambitious team just beyond making the playoffs. We want to have a crack at the Supporter Shield. We want to compete at the top of the Western Conference, and teams have to find a way to break down opponents who make these games difficult. I feel like this was something last year we were so good at in the middle of the season, and then it was too little too late at the end of the season, where the same thing happened, where it almost felt like we took our foot off the gas, and we lost that home field advantage throughout the Western Conference final. Anybody who was at that LA game in the Western Conference playoffs last year knows that was an incredible atmosphere. And I think that should have shown the club that not just getting home field advantage is nice, but it should be a must. So right now we're two games. LA's got in hand with us. We're level on points, but yeah, let's get into this game here. So I think about this match on paper. Last time we played Minnesota was 6-0 at home. James Rodriguez made his debut in a 6-0 thrashing, which is always good to see. But I think the biggest thing about this match is that it felt like two teams that kind of respected each other. This wasn't an open game where both teams were trading chances. It was much more of a tactical battle. And both teams kind of understood that one mistake was going to essentially decide the entire match. I think Minnesota came in with a very clear plan that they weren't interested in letting the Whitecaps play the game at our preferred pace. They slowed things down, made the middle of the field crowded, and we really forced the Whitecaps to try and solve a difficult problem. Now, if you watch the game, the passes weren't as clean as they should be. Attempts weren't as solid as we would have hoped. But the one thing I can think we should take away is the credit that we didn't get frustrated defensively. We didn't start forcing passes or making reckless decisions. The back line really stayed composed. So the problem also was on the other side of the ball, is we controlled parts of the game, but just because we controlled the game doesn't mean we created danger. And I think that really credits Minnesota just clogging up the midfield there. So if there's one thing that everybody should be really coming away with, is that this was a very, very good defensive performance. Credit to Takaoka for having another clean sheet. I think I saw the Whitecap socials said that he's on 6 now. So that's phenomenal. But yeah, one thing I want to say is that when the Whitecaps offense hasn't been clicking, it feels like our defensive side of the ball really almost gets compromised. Whereas last night, that back line was solid. Okay, let's jump into this because this is one thing that I was a little bit frustrated with was the Veselinovic injury. Really happy to have him come back into the team. I thought the partnership between him and Blackman has been phenomenal. That being said, he goes off around the 12-minute mark with an injury. And then we kind of just shown that flashes of what that partnership could be. Tate Johnson, phenomenal. Laborda, phenomenal. I think I'm the biggest Tate Johnson fan there is. And also Laborda comes back into that right wing back position. I think that's his natural position. I think he fills the void on the defensive line as a center back, but it's not his happy place. So one of the things that we don't notice is the passing from the back line, I think. So we looked really organized. The distance between everyone was really good, and this didn't really allow Minnesota to break us down or play through them. At the end, it started to get a little bit sloppy when the game was really, really stretched. But for the most part, the defensive side of the ball really helped see this through to pick up a point. We also didn't have a lot of those like emergency plays or emergency clearances. Everyone just seemed to be in the right place where they should be. So whether it was the center backs winning important battles, midfielders helping protect dangerous areas, or Takioka really staying composed, it almost looked like we could trust ourselves defensively. Sometimes watching the Caps, I felt like the best defense is a better offense. But last night, kind of watching that tactical chess match, I felt really confident with our defensive system. Why that really matters is because as we get closer to the run-in, as we get closer to, we're going to have Leagues Cup kickoff next week, so that's going to be a good test of where we're actually at. I feel the Mexico teams really, really press. They make you work for it. So there's going to be a lot of testing going on this defensive line. And I feel like if teams can survive attacks like that should be very, very good signs going into the MLS playoffs. So I've really hyped up the defensive part of the ball, like what happened with the attack. So we had enough of the ball, but the challenge seemed like turning that possession into something dangerous just wasn't really there. And I don't want to punch down on it, but I think this is where Minnesota really deserves credit, that they defended exactly how you would against a team like Vancouver. Are people going to make note of that? Yes, because obviously with the Caps being at the top of the Western Conference, anybody is going to be watching tape on how can we stop this attack. Brian White kind of looked off. Muller was creating, but not enough. Badwell, Sabali, same. But I think what happened is they tried to remove the space between the midfield and defensive lines, and they tried to make Gauld uncomfortable. They tried to force Vancouver out wide, and this is where the final ball becomes difficult. I think a lot of the time in MLS play, former Whitecaps games, across seasons, I've always talked about this, that it felt like Vancouver would take the ball down the right or the left-hand channels, whether that was the wingers or the defensive pairings, like the right backs or the wing backs, is that they would just take the ball and just try and get that final ball into the box and have somebody get onto the end of it. It worked, but that's why we're talking about Vancouver's always been I don't want to say bottom half team, but like we've never really made deep runs into the MLS playoffs, because that's kind of been the strategy of Dos Santos, Vanni Sartini. Like this, it's almost like this style of football, although it's so common in Europe, has like just started to come to the Whitecaps, I feel like. And we're just starting to look like a real team as opposed to how Sartini and Dos Santos has managed the team. So seeing that style of football again, I think our midfielders, they create chances from not the wide areas. So clogging up the middle kind of shuts it down. So Vancouver struggling creatively. This conversation naturally is going to go to Muller and Ryan Gauld. Can we really criticize Ryan Gauld? He's been out for, God, probably as long as we have, to be completely honest, with a knee injury. He gets his first kind of minutes back under the team. He plays 45 yesterday, but I think it's important to separate the narrative now between Gauld didn't have a huge game from Gauld was bad. And that's the same with Muller. There's been a lot of chat about Muller's age. Like last year, I think it was maybe the start of this year that he looked off. He wasn't what he was showing in that end of the half of the season last year. But I think as a team, Minnesota did a good job making both of them work for touches. And for Gauld, he often had to drop deep to get involved, which meant he wasn't receiving the ball in those dangerous areas where he hurts teams. So having him drop back is not his best life. And it's the same with Muller. These aren't midfielders that are going to take the ball from our end and just sprint to the 18-yard box, throw a crazy pass into Brian White, and he's going to finish it. They are the most dangerous when they pick up the ball in the offensive third and really create magic with it. So with Minnesota removing that, it just made both of them uncomfortable, and it made them force into these wide areas. So the question for Vancouver going forward is, when teams successfully limit Gauld, who else becomes the difference maker? Now, this is something that, April, you would have said Berhalter. You would have said Muller. You would have said even Badwell. Like, those three would have needed to step up. Now, obviously, Berhalter not there. Like I said at the top of the hour, Keys looking sealed to Middlesbrough, but who else is going to make that happen? Muller doesn't have the legs, so this is where I think Sabali and Badwell really needed to shine. They needed to pick up those, like, not let Ryan Gauld drop so deep, but kind of, when he does drop deep, provide him an outlet. Provide him a hold up or a link up. Drop back with him so that he can kind of drop the ball off to you and start that run into the dangerous area where he can pick the ball back up. But with how Minnesota defended, it just seemed like they were there to get a draw. And if they could stretch the game like they really did in the last 15 minutes and kind of hit Vancouver on the counterattack, that just seemed like their game plan. And I think that's why I'm kind of on the fence about this, that I think this was a very big point to pick up, but it just left us like wanting a little bit more. I feel like that game was very, very winnable. I think if we're not so far removed from this massive World Cup break, that this would have been 3 points coming back. So, and I think that's one thing that's really, really important right now is that the team has been gone. What are we talking now? Like 38 days minimum for the World Cup, right? And you're getting thrusted right back into MLS action. So it's very, very difficult. And I think a little, I don't want to say unfair because at the end of the day, like sports are unfair. Like everybody's in the same situation. But mid-season's very, very difficult just because we're top of the table. It's not like the Premier League has taken a mid-season break for this. I don't want to draw comparisons to 2022 in Qatar when the World Cup was in the winter, but this is just kind of the hand the teams are dealt, and it's a bit frustrating as supporters because we halted all of the momentum we had going up into the World Cup. So I think that's just like a really important thing to note. And what we need to focus on, going back to the Minnesota game, is the final third. How do we find improvement in kind of cracking the code against really organized teams? When teams sit deep, we need something who can create something unexpected. So we essentially need clever movement, dangerous set pieces, individual quality, and we just didn't have enough of these moments. And this is where I think this transfer of Berhalter to Burrow is going to be really, what's the word? Like heartbreaking almost for the Whitecaps because he really slotted in to that. He was so good on the set pieces, but I don't want to cry about spilt milk because obviously as players shine to the quality that he did, they're going to have moves, especially to Europe. Look at Ali Ahmed, right? Right to Norwich. So we need somebody to fill that gap. And I think the obvious person right now is going to be Badwell. I also think that as the team progresses on that person, maybe it's not Badwell that is going to elevate and find that missing role. So I think also that the tactical battle was actually a really interesting takeaway. Vancouver really wanted to control the game, but Minnesota was really comfortable with allowing them to have possession in areas that weren't dangerous. That's the difference between having a ball and hurting a team. We just weren't deadly in that final third. We could move the ball around the back line, but Minnesota was essentially just sitting back and saying, yeah, go on. You can have that. We don't want to give you the space in the middle. And I think the challenge that the Whitecaps are going to face going forward, based off of last night's performance, was learning how to break that down. Good teams eventually become teams that opponents just don't respect, but that they fear. And part of that is proving you can punish teams when they decide to sit back. So Sorensen needs to take this away and really question the tactics that if a team is going to set a low block, what are we going to do that's going to punish them for it? Not just us having possession and looking for that like ball in or, that lucky bounce, but almost forcing a team that like, yeah, go on. If you sit back, like, good luck. We've got all this quality. Like, we want you to sit back. Actually, we play better when you sit back because as the season progresses and we're going to start facing a lot of these bubble teams where I think Minnesota is, let's take a look here. So Minnesota currently is sitting 9th right now in the MLS standings, the Western Conference. So I would consider that a bubble team. I would say Portland in 10, LA in 11, San Diego in 12. Like, it's pretty tight. Actually, the bottom of the MLS Western Conference is really, really tight. So we're going to have to play teams that are going to come to BC Place. We're going to go into their home pitch and they're going to sit back and be like, go on. Like, we're fine with a point. But if we want to attack the supporter shield, if we want to have home field advantage through the Western Conference, we're going to need to come at these teams and be like, nah, fam, a low block is just not, it's like our specialty. So I think that should be top of Sorensen's mind right now. And I think the way the Whitecaps set up really invited a team to get punished with a low block. You essentially had two holding defenders in Cubas and Larraz, which I'm not the biggest Larraz fan right now. I haven't seen the quality yet. Obviously, everybody rates Cubas so highly. So as a defensive midfielder, I would say he's probably best in the league right now. But you had Badwell, Muller, Sabali, and White really attacking, and with a low block, it really needs to be on them to find a creative way in. And when that gets taken away from the middle, there just needs to be a spark somewhere else. But let's look at the key performance takeaways here. I think the biggest for me was Takaoka. This was just another calm performance. Didn't have to make a lot of saves, but often that's what good goalkeepers do. They just stay ready. We saw him clearing things out. I just think he's just so reliable right now. I don't there's no complaints with Takaoka. I thought he played a fantastic game. If we want to look into the midfield, I know I was saying about Badwell, Muller, Sabali, Cubas, and Larraz, but defensively, fantastic. But it's just the offensive side of things right now. It was just, they struggled to speed the game up. With Minnesota sitting in that low block, you really invite a calm, you invite a slow game, and that's where the midfield needs to take it on them to speed the game up. And sometimes the best way to beat a compact team is moving the ball faster than they can shift around. And I just don't feel like the midfield found rhythm. That being said, we're 2 games back from a 40-plus day break where we've only done training. It would have been nice to see the Whitecaps schedule friendlies. I saw Sporting Kansas City. They did that actually against all of the England B team, but I remember reading that all of the players that didn't play the opening Croatia game all played the Sporting Kansas City in a behind doors closed friendly. So it's kind of disappointing that the Whitecaps didn't use that opportunity to potentially even have friendlies against CPL teams. It would have been awesome to see behind closed doors friendly against Vancouver FC. Hell, even if you did a Sounders B team, I think that everyone would have benefited from some friendlies. And I think that extended break is really showing. And it's the same with Brian White. He was working hard, but this was a night when they needed him to create a moment, and he just consistently wasn't able to do that. And it wasn't for lack of effort. I just think that the way Minnesota set up, they invited the Caps to attack, and that the Caps almost looked like they were scared. The passes weren't crisp, the shots on target just were not strong. It just, I don't know. It was a very frustrating game from an offensive side, but defensively, we're going to sit back here and kind of praise the result. So the bigger picture here is, what does this result actually mean? I know I've sat here and I've chatted about, I kind of gave a lot of credit to Minnesota, and I've really discredited the offensive side of the ball, where I've really rated how highly the defensive side of the ball was for the Whitecaps. So what does this mean for Vancouver? I think this is not a game where you walk away saying, oh my God, we have all these problems, we're exposed, because the team was solid, they were disciplined, and difficult to beat. But it's also a game where you say nothing's perfect. So the next step is for the team to turn these performances into wins. Good teams don't just avoid losing difficult games, we find a way to win them. And that should be the writing on the wall for the Whitecaps, that yes, we're returning from a break and that this was a very, very difficult game. But as we push on towards the run-in, is that we need to find a way to win these difficult games, because these difficult games are going to come very fast at us. And when I say very fast at us, is I mean that everybody's going to be scrapping for points now. This isn't like the Premier League where, you know, the top four are kind of separated. This Western Conference final, this Western Conference table is very tight. You've got LA on 21 points, and you've got the fourth place Salt Lake on 26. So you've got a 5-point gap from 4 to 11. So these difficult games are going to come very fast because everybody's scrapping for points. And I think now we're going to get into the big fixtures. So this is one that I'm very, very excited for, is LA next week. LA, we've got 2 games on LA. We're sat on 33 points. Actually, San Jose, LA, and Vancouver all on 33 points. We've got 2 games in hand on LA. San Jose, we've got 1 game on, and then everybody else kind of near us is all on 18 matches played. So obviously we make up the difference with the LA game. The Chicago game gets moved, which is what it is. I'm okay with that. I felt like it was a little bit, obviously, yes, the wildfires, but I'm okay with that game being moved just because it's a big return. And I think right now, Chicago have a lot to play for with Lewandowski joining up. So if we can actually, it benefits the Caps, I think, more than anyone, because you're going to have a difficult game. I think they got moved to like mid-October. I could be wrong, but you're going to have a very, very difficult game when the team should be primed. So that's just kind of looking forward. But let's look at some takeaways from last night. Is that the biggest takeaway I think we can focus on? Vancouver's defense is for real. We have built a foundation that travels and can compete with anyone, anywhere, anytime, any place, everything. So this defensive system is for real. And we get Adekube back 400 plus days since action, which is really good to see, because I feel like he's a guy that can create danger on that left-hand side. The second takeaway is that this attack needs answers. Teams aren't rolling up to these games anymore and being like, it's just the Whitecaps, like, they're good. We are going to be respected more and more and more. So the way opponents are going to set up is a direct correlation to the respect they have of us. The challenge is going to be finding a solution when opponents make that game ugly. And teams are going to make that game ugly. This LA game on Saturday, this is going to be an all-out slugfest. I think that's just something to really note on right now. The last takeaway that I've really written down on my hot notes here is this looks like a contender's performance, because you're going into a playoff team. You're scrapping away a very grimy, solid defensive result and picking up points. But on the flip side, its contenders also have to win these games. And just to kind of, like, there's not a lot to really talk about in this game. So I just kind of want to wrap up this Minnesota game here, is that I really don't think this was a bad result, because I think this was a very, very good result for where we're at and for our end goal. But how the team gets to the next step is to take these loss of drop points and finding the extra moment that turns them into 3. And that's kind of just how I wanted to really tie a bow on this Minnesota game for everyone. We can dive into all the stats and all that, but I think as I get back into this podcast, and I know Damien would want the same, is let's just take it slow. We don't want to overwhelm everyone with like a 2-hour welcome back podcast. I can't wait to get Damien back on. Here's some hot takes, but this is just us dipping our toes in the sand. But yeah, so let's just tie it up on a big bow with that here as we look forward to the LA game. I think this is going to be a phenomenal game. I think BC Place is just going to be buzzing. The World Cup, the atmosphere was phenomenal. And I think that just provided a little bit of a taste of what could happen here in the next couple months. Like if the Whitecaps can start making a deep run, that atmosphere of just BC Place rocking, it's going to be so clear and evident as we go forward here. So yeah, just kind of first podcast back. We're going to shake off the rust here. Solo podcast for me. So that's a little bit nerve-wracking. I know we're talking about what we love, but still. But yeah, was hoping to see everyone in against the LA game turn up. Should be a massive game, massive result. Shouldn't say massive result. There is an opportunity for a massive result. And this is one that I really believe that everything over these last 2 matches that Sorensen's kind of built on is kind of leading to this road. I think LA are in a little bit of trouble right now. Son I think he just scored his first of the MLS last week. But yeah, this should be a very interesting game, very interesting run in here. And then basically we are almost stopping the MLS season because we get another break because, no, I shouldn't say we don't get a break, but Leagues Cup kicks off. So we're going to have that going on. So should be a very interesting time for the Whitecaps. And I'm just glad to be back rocking with you all. And yeah, we'll end it with that. That's all for me this week. We'll be back after the LA game. Like I said, Damien will be back with me. We're going to be giving all of our hot takes, all that fun stuff. It's going to be a lot more content coming out from us. And yeah, just glad to be back. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for chiming in, listening, and we'll chat soon. Thanks for listening to another episode of Caps Cast presented by Whitecaps Fan TV. You can find us on Spotify, YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram listed below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content.